Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners issues on updates for October 1st. Can you believe it already? 2024. County Administrator Gary Schmidt. What's the first item?
Thank you, Chair Smith. All commissioners are present. They're walking to the dais now. First up, and your meeting is the Board of Commissioners this entire session. First is request for consent agenda. And first is elected officials, starting with the Assessor's Office. Item 1, approval of a contract amendment with Woolpert for mobile assessor licensing and a renewal of a professional services agreement. The amendment value is $213,469.62 for 3 years. Total contract value is increased to $544,822.13 for 7 years. Funding is through budgeted county general funds. Bronson Rueda, the elected treasurer, welcome. Elected Assessor Bronson Rueda, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you, Gary. Good morning, Chair Smith, County Commissioners. Thank you for your time today. I'm here to request moving the Woolpert Contract Amendment Number 2 to the consent agenda for approval. This amendment, as Gary went over, is a 3-year extension of our current Woolpert contract originally signed on December 1st, 2020. At a high level, Woolpert gives us the mobile assessor application, which enables our appraisers to use mobile devices, iPads, in the field. They then input information in real time during inspections with instantaneous syncing to the cloud and then to our servers and core software after the information is reviewed and approved. This is an immeasurable improvement to our previous method of taking boxes of paper out to the field, taking notes on paper, bringing those notes back, giving them to support staff for data entry, and then reviewing the notes once they're input into our system. I recommend the board approve to move this contract amendment to Thursday's consent agenda for final approval. Are there any questions?
No. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Commissioners. My computer screen went blank. I said no. I was saying, computer, no, don't do that. Okay. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah.
There's a charger here.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing no objections? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bronson. Next, the Sheriff's Office. Item 2, elected officials, approval of a grant application to the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission for the jail-based medications for opioid use disorder. Anticipated grant value is $372,771 for 1 year. Funding is through the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. No county general funds are involved. Captain Lee Eby from the Sheriff's Office, and please introduce who's with you.
As also the Health Service Manager at the jail, Melanie Menier.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Chair and Board, thank you for having me here today. I'm here to request the Board to place on the consent agenda for approval the jail-based medications for opioid use disorder grant of $372,771. Funding is through the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. No county general funds will be involved. The purpose of the jail-based medications for opioid use disorder grant program is to provide opioid use disorder treatment and transition planning services to persons in custody. The proposed initiative will allow the Clackamas County Jail to partner with a community provider, CODA, to expand access to evidence-based substance use treatment, specifically methadone, and support reentry and continuity of care when individuals are in custody of the Clackamas County Jail. The objectives of this funding opportunity will be to create and expand our jail-based counseling and medications for opioid use disorder, serving adults in custody and with opioid use disorder. Clackamas County Jail will leverage these grant funds along with pre-existing relationships we have with CODA to launch Oregon's first jail-integrated medication unit for opioid treatment program. We ask kindly that the Commissioner approve this grant so we move forward with getting these funds for our jail.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, Captain Eby. Does this program come with some kind of counseling to begin to reduce the amount of methadone that these people are required or need while they're in jail?
It comes with counseling that is involved as part of the treatment program. As for the amount of methadone necessary, that is a provider-related issue that we give directly to the providers as to what they think is appropriate for the medical use.
Okay. And if this was not granted, what would be the alternative to the jail-based prescription of methadone in the jail?
Well, we utilize methadone in certain rare occasions. This is to expand it and to actually have a provider who would not only expand it within the jail, but also have that continuity of care outside the facility itself. We also have other MAT programs that we utilize in the jail in addition to methadone. Suboxone, for one, is another example.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, but I'm fine with this being on the consent agenda for Thursday. But I do have a question. My business was across the street from Methadone Clinic on McDolphin Boulevard for years, and I always saw the swarm of people in the morning getting their treatments. I presumed that it was a once-a-day treatment. Is that accurate, or it's just once a day?
That's correct.
It's once a day,
It's a
okay.
once-a-day treatment.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no objections, thank you. I'm going to pass the gavel to Commissioner West. I need to take a phone call. Thank you very much. Just stay here.
I'm going to just scoot over. We had conversations about the program before. Is it still primarily like methadone specific, or are we using buprenorphine and other medications to help manage the, people's symptoms?
We use 3 forms of medication within the jail for opiate use disorder: buprenorphine, long-acting or oral naltrexone, and as well as methadone. The jail cannot prescribe methadone on our own. We must partner with an outside organization for individuals to continue to take their methadone while they're in custody. This grant allows us to build on the relationship we currently have, and to reduce the amount of off-site transportation that we require for adults in custody to obtain their methadone.
Are we using any of the injection forms like Suplinates?
We do. When we have additional grant funding, we do use the long-acting form of buprenorphine. When individuals are interested, we find that interest in the long-acting buprenorphine kind of waxes and wanes with the environment in the community or what the individual is looking for in treatment.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Anyone else have any further questions? Thank you for coming today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is County Administration. Item 1, approval of a change order number 21 with Clackamas Progress Partners for the replacement county courthouse. Change order value is a credit to the county of $48,260.50. Total credit balance is then $217,835.05. Funding is through credits from previous change orders, which does include budgeted county general funds. I will present this item. This credit is due to deleting items that are no longer needed in the construction phase, such as unnecessary docket displays, re-engineering the key system to what is actually needed, which was a cost savings, changes to the badging stations that are no longer needed, and some of the finishes on furniture and other products are less expensive than were anticipated. So all of these results in a credit, as mentioned, of $48,260.50. But of course, it's your authority to put this, to approve this on the consent agenda. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this credit, or Andrew Naylor is here to help me answer your questions too.
Questions or comments?
None?
Seeing no objections,
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for being here. The finance item we are pulling because there was a correction that needs to be made, and we'll bring it back to you next week. Next, Transportation and Development, item 1, approval of a personal services contract with Burgess and Nipley for consolidated transportation safety planning services. Total contract value is $1,185,000 for 2 years. Funding is through the Oregon Department of Transportation and the United States Department of Transportation grants. No county general funds are involved. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Chair Smith, Commissioners, we're here to share with you a desire to enter into a personal services contract, basically to provide consulting services to conduct consolidated transportation safety planning. There's 3 key components to this work that we're looking to do. One is to integrate the safe systems approach into the county's transportation and development planning process. The second is to build a post-crash triage system for serious and fatal traffic crashes that seeks to understand the root cause of the crash, but more importantly, and I want to put a highlight to this, to build and interventions that can occur. So when talking with staff, it was an interesting discussion to have. When you have a fatality, for example, in the hospital, there's a direct connection to wraparound services for those individuals going through or feeling the results of that particular loss. There aren't services of that nature when it comes to a fatality on our roadways. And so the desire is to try to build a connection between us, our partners in H3S, and others to ensure that connection gets made and services are made available to those individuals who may lose somebody on our roadways, which is exciting. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances, but an exciting opportunity to provide services to those folks who may have a loss. Last but not least is to develop a comprehensive marketing campaign targeting one of the most common behaviors causing serious and fatal crashes, which is distracted driving, and to push that out to the public. As Gary said, there are primarily two funding sources. One's the Oregon Department of Transportation to the tune of $855,000, and then we are getting a Safe Streets for All program grant in the amount of $330,000. The project was advertised in accordance with ORS and LCRB rules on June 12, 2024. There were two proposals. A selection committee of 4 representatives from DTD and one from PGA scored this particular proposer the highest amongst the two. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions or comments for the presenter? Seeing no objections, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Health, Housing, and Human Services. Item 1, approval of an amendment to increase funding and extend the term of an intergovernmental agreement with Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue for ambulance services. The amendment value is $54,070.92 for 1 year. Total agreement value increased to $463,703.88 for 12 years. Funding is through the Cost Savings Program with American Medical Response Northwest. No county general funds are involved. Rod Cook, Director of Health, Housing, Human Services. Go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. Each year, the county updates its IGAs with the City of Lake Oswego, Clackamas Fire District Number 1, and Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue Consortium to ensure rapid response to 911 medical calls. Last month, you approved 2 agreements for the Clackamas Fire District Number 1 and the City of Lake Oswego. This is the final agreement with the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue.
Questions or comments for the presenter on this? Seeing no objections, thank you.
Item 2, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Sandy for the Mount Hood Express bus service. Total agreement value is $141,435 for 1 year. Funding is through the State of Oregon Rail and Public Transit Division and $55,000 from budgeted county general funds.
The city and county have effectively collaborated through a shared contractor for over 7 years to develop transit policies, manage bus services, and inform the public. They will also assist in grant applications and allocate resources for a seamless transit experience. This particular agreement significantly enhances our transit services by expanding operating hours and improving connectivity by providing 4 additional bus service hours on the SAM, which is the Sandy, Local, and Gresham Express. Gresham route on Saturdays and ensuring seamless connections with the Mount Hood Express. We would also introduce 8 hours of Saturday service on this route and add 2 new runs to the Sam Estacada route.
Questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah, Commissioner, go.
Yeah, so can you tell me the origin of the $55,000 of county budgeted funds? Is it from another program that is dealing, with Health and Human Services dollars? I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I just want to just understand what the origin or how that is, how that originated.
The board is typically invested in some level of transit, and so that's just a line item that has been approved annually. Okay. Other funds we get are from some tax proceeds, but the general fund is what you've allocated.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no objections, thank you.
Item 3, approval of a grant application to the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs to support County Veterans Service Office operations. Anticipated award value is $273,069 for 1 year. Total project value is $1,211,016. Funding is through the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs and $663,747 in budgeted county general funds.
Yes, this is a request to strengthen our county Veterans Service Office, which helps Clackamas County veterans access essential benefits such as disability benefits, needs-based pensions, VA health care, and other military service-related benefits. In fiscal year '24, this funding allowed us to enhance staffing and programs, facilitating both in-office and outreach engagements, and securing over $26 million in benefits for our veterans and their families.
Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, Rod, I want to thank you for this. How many veteran service officers do we now have? Or, it was
I'd
4?
have to.
You have to check?
Yeah, I'd have to
okay.
check, but I know through the board's work again on this one, we've added FTE over the years through the board's approval of that. So I can get you the exact number.
Okay, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 4, approval of an amendment to a revenue grant agreement with the State of Oregon to increase shelter funding related to the governor's state of emergency due to homelessness. Amendment value is $1,400,000 for 9 months. Total agreement value is increased to $3,250,000 for 1 year. Funding is through the State of Oregon Housing and Community Services Department. No county general funds are involved.
Clackamas County has already made significant strides in addressing homelessness, leveraging the $7.3 million from House Bill 5019 and $10.3 million from Senate Bill 5511 to fund outreach, prevention, and rehousing programs in rural communities. This amendment builds on the foundation laid by House Bill 5019, allowing us to secure essential new shelter funding to strengthen access centers in Estacada and Molalla. It will support outreach services from the Father's Heart and Ant Farm, specifically targeting the needs of rural communities.
It's an increase in funding. Is there an increase in capacity of the people we take in? Would you like to come
We'll
up?
have Vahid come up to give you.
And please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. Vahid Brown, Deputy Director of Housing and Community Development. And yes, Chair, this would increase the capacity of our rural programs to outreach to folks and to admit them into shelter programming.
And in these rural communities, I assume we're working with their city governments and in coordination with what their value systems are and what they hope the outcomes will be.
Extensively, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I have a similar question. So I totally recognize that within the metro boundaries where the supportive housing services dollars are, we have, I won't say an abundance, but we have resources out there far more than we have rural resources. So I understand where this is being directed. But in yesterday's events and news, it was said several times over different channels about we're at capacity, we're at capacity. So what is the bottleneck? When they say that, what's our bottleneck right now?
In the sense of how much need exceeds capacity, that?
Well, we
bottleneck?
talked about that one on Clackamas Road yesterday, right? So that's
yep.
urban, that's within the supportive housing services, so money's not the issue, right?
Yeah.
So what's our bottleneck when that statement's being conveyed, not only to us, but to the world?
So
Where's our bottleneck at?
We do have a much more robust system of safety off the streets infrastructure now than we did several years ago because of supportive housing services dollars. And, it's, we've exceeded our goal in the past year of expanding that infrastructure. We're getting close to 200 units now. I think it's 185. Now, at any given day, there are more people who are unsheltered than we have capacity to shelter them. So we work expeditiously with our partners to move people through shelter as quickly as possible to make placements into permanent housing and free up that resource for the next person. The example of the folks at Clackamas Road, those are all people connected with us. I know them all by name. I've seen all of their assessments, and they are sort of waiting in the wings, so to speak, for those available resources. But there does exist a need for those services that exceeds the capacity. Now, most of that resource is in the metro urban growth boundary. And so the intention with this funding is to expand our capacity to provide safety off the streets in the rural parts of the county.
Right. So if I heard you correctly, so I understand this when I get asked the question, is that as I heard it yesterday, and I want to just drive this point home, It seemed like we didn't have shelter capacity yesterday in response to a couple of the folks that were there. Great job, by the way, on all the work. It was nice to hear them say that they have heard from Clackamas County and Loved One and others. So they all acknowledged they knew this was coming, they worked and so on and so forth. But it sounds like we're at a lack of having shelter. Can you just amplify that a little bit? Is that shelter for a shelter site? Is that a hotel room shelter capacity? What does that mean?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Savas. I mean, it's simply that the need exceeds the capacity of what we've been able to build. We continue to build out, right? So we have about 57 hotel rooms that are permanently utilized for this programming, and Loved One and the Father's Heart provides the supportive services. Our outreach and housing navigation providers have flexible funds that when someone is enrolled and on the path to a program that they've been admitted to, they can put them in a motel for a period of time as they prepare to move into that apartment and so forth. But again, with hundreds of people, that when we have about 200 units of shelter, and there are more than 200 people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, then we're going to continue to have need that can't be met in the moment on any given day. The folks in the Clackamas Road incident, our partners are in continual communication with them. I know that some of them are being connected with today to try to make offers to shelter. There had been offers for other kinds of programming in the past, but it doesn't always fit everyone's needs. But as you said, there were continual efforts to problem solve with those folks.
Yeah, not for today, but I would like to know what shelter types that we need to increase our capacity to meet the need. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner.
Commissioner Schull?
Yes, good morning. Does Ant Farm currently have an operating resource center in Molalla and Estacada?
No, they don't have an operating resource center. They have both of those cities respectively support through this city-led initiatives program to receive funding to stand up resource centers. And we're just meeting with the city manager of Molalla yesterday, talking with Ant Farm today. We're working on establishing those resource centers.
So help me understand. Ant Farm is the outreach organization for linking those people in Estacada and Molalla communities who need housing support with city staff? How does that work, please?
No, so good question, Commissioner Schull. So Ant Farm does have staff that do outreach to folks experiencing homelessness in the community. Some of that is funded by the emergency order dollars that this shelter grant is associated with. We also fund this outreach with Loved One. So Loved One has a rural outreach program. So there's two partners that do outreach to folks experiencing homelessness in the community, including in Molalla and Estacada. Ant Farm has other site-based programming. They have cafe in Sandy. They have a youth drop-in center in Sandy. They have other site-based facilities that are able to connect with people. But the resource center to connect folks experiencing homelessness to the variety of resources is a concept that has been applied for. The cities supported that. We brought those to you several months ago in the city-led initiatives, and with your support, we're moving forward with those.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner West?
Rod Vahid, thank you. Good morning. It's good to see both of you. I think Paula is hitting on a really important issue here, is I know that down in Southern Oregon, Blaze Industry is building our pods right now going next to the Veterans Center. I know that that's I'm glad that it's local. I'm glad that I can see them under construction. I've seen those pictures. That's really exciting stuff. But I still feel like that we haven't in the region done enough with low barrier emergency shelter, where we put up military-style tents and cots, and we build that type of very low barrier to get people off the streets and at least help kind of wrap them into our care system. We talked a little bit that I think falls within this, like safe parking sites for RVs. I know Commissioner Schull and I have really pushed that idea pretty strongly, similar to what we saw by Salvation Army over there by Marine Drive in Portland. I'm curious if you think that we could have these people housed. Like, I agree with Commissioner Savas. The feedback was you guys were available, you were in contact, we didn't have the capacity. But if we had those low barrier, like maybe sites that were in that kind of tent military style with cots and facilities, that maybe we would have had that, and that seems like it'd be relatively easy to get up if we wanted to get that up and affordable. Do you see that being a benefit in this circumstance where we would have had that resource available and it sounds like we can if we have the will to do it? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question, Commissioner West. Thank you. And I think yes, this is something that would, I'd be happy to provide options to this board about what that would look like. We have tried to build a balanced continuum so that we don't overinvest in a temporary stay that isn't housing, that doesn't have a funded suite of programs to exit from that temporary stay into permanent housing. So our shelter capacity is designed, while it isn't enough for everyone who's experiencing unsheltered homelessness, it's also not too much in the sense that we don't want to put someone in a motel room for a year when there's no housing placement in the near term. And so we've balanced those investments so that we've been able to do that. Now, investing in a low barrier site-based campground kind of concept or park site is a modality of safety off the streets that I'm happy to provide options to this board about pursuing. And we would have to look at that continuum and make decisions about, well, do we have enough resources for the exits from those programs?
And I think that we've talked about this. Some people just aren't even ready for 4 walls, right?
Yeah.
And you can see exactly what their motel room or hotel room is going to look like by looking at their tent, right?
That's
They're
right.
just not mentally ready for that type of housing yet, or they're not there in the care continuum. But having more of that transitional low barrier, you have that more permanent style tent with the appropriate services there, place to go that's safe, and then working with them with where they're at, I think is probably a piece within our care continuum we still lack. And then maybe those individuals that we didn't have anywhere might only be there for a few days or a week, but it's much better and safer than being on the streets. And then we're already wrapping those services around to get them to that next step in the care continuum. I still think we have a gap there that maybe we should look at.
Okay. Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, I just want to mention, well, first of all, thank you for all you do. I had the opportunity to talk to some folks yesterday, and I told them how fantastic you guys are with what you're doing. And it's just phenomenal what this county has done under your leadership, Rod, and under your leadership, Fahid. One of the things I wanted to mention that Commissioner Savas and I, when we went to visit Lane County, they have a great model for what Commissioner West that you just spoke about in terms of having that low barrier piece. And I know the Commissioner Farr, I think he's still a commissioner down there. We visited that, didn't we, Paul? That was, yeah.
He came up here and visited us.
Yep, he did. So that would be a great model, and I'm glad you brought it up, Commissioner West. Thank you.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Commissioner.
Savas?
Yeah, just, thanks, Fahid. I appreciate that. If I got a message that's somewhat new to me here today, and that is that, I won't say new, but, you've amplified that, is that we need to have more permanent housing to relieve some of the transitional housing that we're now at capacity. And how much of that is voucher-based?
Most of it.
So, okay.
So we need more vouchers. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I have a general question that I'm not sure there's an answer to, but I'm going to take a stab at it, and don't feel bad if you can't answer it. There has never been more money available and put into trying to solve the problem of homelessness. And Vahid, you said, well, we have more homeless than we do places for them. Do we ever foresee on the horizon when we get to a point where homelessness starts to plateau and then decrease? Or is it the more money we put in, the more people are homeless who are taking advantage of the services?
And that's a deep question, Chair. And I think that we do have some information to speak to that, right? And I mean, we're all very proud of the point-in-time count data that indicates that from 2019 to 2023, there was a 65% decrease, right? Now that's the same methodology of counting each time, the same numbers of volunteers at the same sites. Now, it's not a census. We're not able to count everyone experiencing homelessness on the point-in-time count. But if year after year after year, for the last 5 years, we've seen significant decreases, more than 25% every count, 65% over that period, we are making progress. I do think that I remain committed to the goal of that rare, brief, and non-recurring, right, that I always
Right.
talk about. I don't think it's a pipe dream. And I think that this board's support and enthusiasm for these programs and these efforts is a big part of why we've been so successful.
Well, I appreciate your dedication and the dedication of all the folks in this department, Rod. Thank you. We'll just keep going at it, and make strides and honor our successes when we have them. I think that's really important, to be in the moment, oh, this is successful, this is what's coming on the horizon. And Commissioners, we have so many programs and places coming online that haven't even been realized yet. And, something that I'm guilty of, we sit here and we pass something, and it takes 6 months or a year and a half for it to go, and I think, we passed that, it should be reflective of our data, but it's not, because it's not online yet. So we're building services from the ground up, literally. There was never a playbook for this. So this commission and all jurisdictions around who are experiencing homelessness are creating programs from nothing and trying to follow best practices when best practices may not exist. So we're recreating those best practices. Thank you. Commissioner West?
Yeah, I just want to walk away today with, I'm wondering if this board can give a little direction. I'd like to see if we could bring that low barrier sheltering on board, Gary. I don't know, I'm one commissioner, so I'm just throwing that out there to the board. I'd like to see where we could begin to fit that in with our plan and our care continuing moving forward. I haven't heard much of that. I'm interested in that because I don't want those people to not have anywhere to go when they have the situation we just had. So I open that question up to my colleagues.
I think we're all on board.
I think we're all on board. I think it's happening. I think it's happening. The point that I just made, Ben, was that. I think we need to go through and take a look at what's on board now and what we have approved in the past to get to where you're at. Now, I'm going to be possibly putting the brakes on some more expansion and new ideas until we know what the SHS tax reduction looks like. Because I don't want us to be in a position of creating new programs and/or services until we know what that income level is coming in for the next several years. I'm just very uncomfortable with that. But to your point, we may have something out there that is coming
I'm
up.
specifically talking to the low barrier, that type of capacity that's not as common in our metro area. I'd like to get some information or options around that potentially, if that's possible.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward. Seeing no objections.
Yes, Commissioner West, staff can bring this back at another future issues to discuss with you and the board.
Thank you.
We'll do that. All right, we're still on consent agenda. Number 5, approval of a revenue grant agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for Community Development Block Grant Funds. Total grant value is $2,177,287 for 7 years. Funding is through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. No county general funds are involved.
Yeah, this is one of 3 awarded through this year's annual action plan application process with HUD. HUD allocates CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant, ESG, that's the Emergency Services Grant, and then the Home Funds via this process. Each of these funds is subject to distinct grant agreements, which we will present to you in sequence. CDBG funds are vital for community development, construction, and public improvement projects in Clackamas County, addressing needs such as infrastructure, public facilities, community centers, housing rehabilitation, public services, microenterprise support, and homeowner assistance.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 6, approval of a revenue grant agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for Emergency Solutions Grant Funds. Total agreement value is $193,672 for 2 years. Funding is through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. No county general funds are involved.
This is the second of 3 awarded through this year's annual action plan application process we just discussed. This is a request for emergency solutions grant funds for the current fiscal year. This award, which will be distributed over 2 years, is essential to improving our homeless services in Clackamas County. These services include shelter support, rent assistance, and essential staffing for our homeless management information systems.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 7, approval of a revenue grant agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for Home Investment Partnership Grant Funds. Agreement value is $921,867 for 9 years. Funding is through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. No county general funds are involved.
This is the last of 3 awarded through this year's annual action plan application process we discussed earlier. These funds support program administration and project loans that facilitate the building, purchasing, and rehabilitation of affordable housing and limited rental assistance.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections?
Item 8, approval of a board order to authorize a loan of Home American Rescue Plan funds to the Limited Partnership for Phase 1, Buildings A and B of the Hillside Park redevelopment project, and delegate limited signing authority to the county administrator and the director of the Department of Health, Housing, and Human Services for all documents necessary for financial closing on the loan. Total loan value is $3,102,082 for 55 years. Loan is through Federal Home American Rescue Plan funds. No county general funds are involved.
The board has actively engaged with the Housing Authority since October 2019 on this transformative project. This funding is crucial for advancing Phase 1 of the Hillside Park redevelopment, which will deliver 275 new units of amenity-rich affordable housing across buildings A, B, and C. In June, we secured a $4 million loan in home funds for Building C, and I'm thrilled to report that construction has already begun. The board order includes 2 key requests: to authorize the loan for Buildings A and B with construction scheduled to begin in November, and 2, to grant limited signing authority to the Clackamas County Chair, County Administrator, and the Director of Housing, Health, Housing, and Human Services to finalize all essential loan documents.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 9, approval of a grant application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing to remove affordable housing barriers within the city of Milwaukee. Anticipated grant value is $6,500,000 for 5 years. Funding through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. No county general funds are involved.
In collaboration with the City of Milwaukee and the Housing Authority of Clackamas County, we propose to and intend to allocate funds for these 3 projects. Phase 2 of the Hillside Park redevelopment, which will create 225 new affordable housing units, acquiring up to 15 homes for affordable home ownership through a community land trust model, and 3, pre-development work on the Sparrow Street project, a 1.9-acre property purchased by the city for affordable housing.
Questions or comments? Seeing none.
Thank you. That is the request for consent agenda items. All of these will be on this Thursday's business meeting agenda for your review. Next, update on Supportive Housing Services Program and what's going on. Emily Klepper, Senior Policy Advisor for the Board of County Commissioners, and Vahid Brown, Deputy Director of Housing and Community Development Division in Health, Housing, Human Services, will present. There is a memo in your packet. And thank you. Go ahead, please, Emily and Vahid.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good
Chair.
morning.
Vahid and I are here today to give you an update, as Gary said, about the Metro Supportive Housing Services Program and the conversations that have been going on with Metro. Last time we were here was in July, so just to recap where we've been, Metro COO developed a report that reviewed, it summarized the stakeholder involvement that they had done during the spring of this year, and then also outlined the 4 considerations that are currently on the table. So just really quick, it's in your memo, but I'll just recap it. It's changes for the supportive housing program include potentially making affordable housing development available, extending or eliminating the tax sunset, establishing a new governance structure, and raising the income threshold or cutting the tax rate. So since July, the board first sent a letter to Metro Council expressing your position and asking some questions. Since then, Metro Council President Peterson has engaged the 3 county chairs in some frequent conversations. Chair Smith has given you those verbal updates as those meetings have occurred. There was a meeting in early September, which I want to bring your attention to for this conversation today. The 4 jurisdictions their finance folks and the electeds met, and Metro at that time provided the counties with estimates for possible revenue reductions, depending on the changes that are made. So on page 2 of your memo, Adam Brown has created a table that outlines or gives some examples of what those reductions could be depending on what is chosen, whether it's a tax threshold issue or a tax rate issue or some combination of both of them. At minimum, the way the conversations have been going, we expect at least a $4 million annual cut to this program. So today, H3S has prepared a potential cut scenario for you to look at. We're not asking for any decisions. It's just something for you to look at. Vahid's going to run through that in just a minute. But we did this for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to demonstrate that H3S is following these conversations very closely. They're planning accordingly. And in an effort not to surprise anyone, we want to make sure that we're revealing what we know at the current time. So I will stop, let Vahid run through the cut scenarios, and then we'll take some questions.
Go ahead, Vahid.
I think I already introduced myself previously. Thanks, Commissioners. So the scenario page at the back of your packet is, as Emily said, just a scenario. This isn't a proposal or a recommendation. This is simply what might it look like to take a $5 million revenue reduction to our programming. A revenue reduction would require cuts to programs and services. We are, as of now, fully committed in terms of the revenue. So there's no wiggle room. It's a zero-sum game. All of the revenue that we've budgeted for that comes in from the tax is committed to these programs. So less revenue means we would have to make some cuts to programs. Now, I mentioned in my previous comments the efforts of the department to build a balanced continuum. So as you see in this scenario, this is a scenario that presents something like a balanced reduction, right? So it reduces some of programming from street outreach, so that there would be about 330 fewer people outreached to if we took a $500,000 reduction to that programming. Some reduction in shelter capacity, 65 fewer households served per year for a $1 million reduction there. Some cuts to our short-term and housing navigation and support programs, rapid rehousing, eviction prevention, and housing placement, and some reductions in permanent supportive housing, the end of the continuum. Now, it's balanced, right? There's 65 fewer households served in shelter and 65 fewer households served in PSH in this scenario for the reasons I described earlier. You want to have a balance across that system. So that's a scenario, simply a scenario, of what a $5 million reduction would look like that would serve 770 fewer people per year than we currently do, given this scenario, and it would save the $5 million. This is all of these estimates are based on real costs from our existing contracts. So we've averaged the cost per household of each of these service types. These are based on actual costs for actual contracted services and programs.
Thank you. I just want to say, not only could there be a possible rate reduction, but they're also reconsidering the governance model. And this is what I've been told, that during this month, it was supposed to be the end of last month, Metro will make a unilateral decision to reduce to increase the indexing, to reduce the amount of taxes being collected. And it's been bandied around 15,000 taxpayers would then be taken off the tax rolls. They also want to make changes to the governance model. We don't know what that's going to look like. There was a draft proposal put around. I gave it to staff. We all, Jane, everybody looked at it. We made some and sent it back. Not that we have a say in this, okay? Then, in May for an election, they want to reduce additionally the tax rate, extend the length of the loan from 10 to I'm not sure what, and be able to use it for sticks and bricks. And the argument from the two other chairs is, if you're going to reduce our funding, that means we're going to have to cut back on services. There will be no money left for sticks and bricks. But it could be our choice that we use it for sticks and bricks instead of something else. and the part of the problem why we're here is Metro says, and the pressures outside, spend every single cent you get. So Multnomah County was hugely criticized for not pushing up services. They have spent 100% and had no reserves last year. Washington County spent 98% of what came in, thinking more was going to come in. I believe our reserves at Clackamas County are hovering around 20%. And we have not been criticized for having that reserve, I believe because we've been fairly successful in what we're doing. So my point is, we have some reserves. Metro has some reserves that they said they could use to backfill the reduction that's to come. Also, Commissioners, a very important point, this tax reduction will take a year to go into effect, just like it took a year for it to start collecting monies. So the people won't even see tax relief, nor will we see a reduction probably in the first year. So I'm throwing a lot of stuff out at you, but it's extremely complicated. But I asked staff to bring this forward to give us possible scenarios. The Portland Metro Chamber Business Council has asked for a 30% reduction overall in the amount of money that's being collected, okay? 30% reduction, and it's outlined here in the scenarios what that would look like. I believe, Fahid, the 30% reduction is the far right bottom column at $15,900,000 reduction in Clackamas County. I don't know if we're going to get there or not. I have no idea, but we need to look at that. And when I say, Commissioners, we need to be very mindful of any new programs that we want to stand up. We have not even paid entirely for the ones that we voted on this year. We still have the Care Center in downtown Oregon City in the old Miles Fiberglass building that is not fully funded. We have our long-term recovery center on the 6 acres that we purchased. That is we've only got $10 million that I see to do that so far. We have some other situations that we're funding that is not fully funded because our assumption was that money was going to keep coming in. And it may be for a little while, but just please be mindful of going forward. We have a couple commissioners here. I'm not sure who was first. Were you? Ben, go ahead.
First question is for council. That governance model was approved by the voters.
Yes.
And I don't understand how the bureaucracy can just decide on to change that actual governance model and how much has to be put back to the voters and is not the decision of Metro and administratively.
I think at a minimum, any significant change.
Is your mic on? I can't hear.
I think at a minimum, any significant change to the governance structure is something that triggers a renegotiation of this overall intergovernmental agreement that we have with the other counties and Metro.
So that would have, you believe that would have to actually go back to the voters?
I think depending on what the change is, at a minimum, it would trigger a renegotiation of our IGA.
Okay. And I think we're a little bit ways off from that, Chair, because that's a little more complicated. I'm a little torn here. I mean, I think that maybe there are ways that we can get more, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, Vahid, but maybe having that lower barrier option is affordable way to still get people off the streets, even though it may not be as ideal as other forms of shelter. I don't know what kind of adjustments we can make. I see 770 households not being served, and we're doing a good job, and I hate being judged by Multnomah County's numbers. And I understand that the Portland business area is going to judge us based on the largest population center that's chronically failed and couldn't govern their way out of a paper bag, to be honest. Like they just aren't doing they're just not as successful. Their worldview that informs this work is not the same as ours, and we have a different outcome than they do. I just see 770 households that aren't getting services now that we have been able to help. I know that people would expect me to say, hey, we got to reduce all these taxes because the business community job creators are pinched. I wish we were just being judged on our outcomes alone. I don't, maybe this is going to be done regardless of what I think. You know, I'm just one out of many local electeds, but I don't see where we can mitigate some of that with what resources we will have left over. I just see no. I don't see any creative like innovations like, hey, maybe lower barrier stuff is going to have to be part of our repertoire, which it traditionally hasn't been. There's been pushback against that type of housing. I don't know. I'm super concerned by this number, and I don't know, Vahid, if you guys have looked like, this is where we'll augment and we can still meet some of this 770 that won't be served now or won't be prevented into homelessness. I'm very concerned by that number.
Yeah, and I am as well, Commissioner West. And I think, as I said, it is a zero-sum game. So there's very little opportunity to mitigate the reductions. Less revenue means less programming.
Is the state prepared to fill the gap here? Because I don't know why the metro area is having to shoulder the entire burden for the state's homelessness. They have not stepped up. Taxpayers in the metro area have. They've spent a gajillion dollars. 2 of the counties have pretty decent outcomes in the metro area. Where the hell's the state? Where are they? Are we not all Oregonians? Where are they? Where's this funding? We're just not going to serve 770 residents. Where are we going to deflect these people? I mean, this is crazy. Where's the state? Excuse me. Where's the governor? Where is the Speaker of the House leading the House and the legislature in this? Where's the funding to do the job? I don't see that here. I see 770 households not getting served at Clackamas, and I know it's more in the rest of the metro area. And what are they going to do? Just go to the piggy bank of the business owners over and over again until they're bled dry? This is crazy. The state needs to step up. I don't like that number, and it's just, we can't say that, yeah, let's do this tax reduction and then just not acknowledge the lives that are sitting in front of us, and every one of these 770, every one of those digits is a person. I don't know. I don't think we found the balance here yet.
Thank you, Commissioner West. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
So I have a question, and I have my comments on that. So the question is, we did send a letter in September, I believe, saying we want to come to the table, and we got a response back from Lynn Peterson saying, sure, let's do it, right? And yet, this thing just keeps on moving without that guidance, without being at the table, a larger table. And so I'm troubled by that. I'm troubled by there's so much movement on here with specifics, and yet they haven't even talked to us in the sense of this table that we asked for, that they said yes. So that said, I've aired that. So my comment, I've been along for this ride from the very beginning when it was discussion, and if you read the articles, I lived it, so to speak, that I was there and listening and so forth. I think the media argued or said that this is being rushed. This whole measure being put on the ballot was being rushed, and it's not really thought through. And then it passes, with a lot of hoopla and changes and so forth. And we sat here, I think in April or whatever, and approved the supporting housing services, forgot what that framework was that we approved. And even then, my comments were, I guess it's guess by golly a little bit. We're kind of flying blind a little bit. Granted, there's a lot of good thought, a lot of good people, a lot of good input. But at the same token is we were supposed to see this big flux of money on July 1st, which never came. The auditor said this, and the revenues went here, and we were flying blind in the sense we didn't know when the monies were come. So all the pressure to get the money on the ground, and everyone was being pressured or guilty of not being ready when really the monies didn't come. And now we're talking about money again and actually subtracting that. So while all of this was happening, we were supposed to staff up and ramp up, and credit to all of you for the great job in building that ramping, all the work we did, the backfilling we did, the blood, sweat, and tears as we're being humiliated in the press for a period of time for, all of this. We live this. I am somewhat appalled that there's really a lack of mathematical thought about this mechanism. Now, when I see this inflationary adjustment, and Commissioner West, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I see the need, but this is based on payroll. right? This isn't property tax. This is payroll. Payroll goes like this, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to have an inflationary factor to this where it indexes, is it going to index down as the prices fall, or is it going to index up because payroll? So what I'm getting at is
It's
that.
just not, it's just not payroll, it's income, like capital gains, passive income as well.
Well, right, correct, understood. But still, it's economically based. It's based on the state of the economy. If you go into recession, we're going to see a huge plummet, right? And if you want to build reserves in for those fluctuations, great. But what I really see is that this is not a property tax kind of a base. And if you're putting an indexing in there, is the index going to be based on inflationary, or is it going to be based on really the revenue flow to keep it stable? I mean, what is the Oz behind the curtain here is, I hope it's not reflective of Wizard of Oz, right? Because when the curtain was revealed, it all looked so good. And clearly Oz had some discretion, right? In that whole thing. Here, I understand the moving pieces of this, but also changing the purpose to housing, sticks and bricks. Well, that's valid, but we had another measure that did that, right? So to me, I think separating the two is important. Now we're mixing so much in here, and I really don't think that I want to know who Oz is. I want to have a conversation about the math. But I think it's really disingenuous for them to keep on motoring down this path, and now we got to plan on cuts, right? Not building the machine. We built the machine, so to speak, but now we have to figure out how to cut it. And yet we have unserved population out over there. So while I see the need for relief, right, and I think there is an argument about equity, about who pays and how. But the mechanism here is payroll and business profits and so on. And I'm not necessarily sure that's the way to do it. And while I hear Commissioner West, the call for the state to step in, this is only the metro region, right? The rest of the state doesn't have these resources. Half the county, geographically, more than half the county of our county, doesn't even see these resources. So there's a lot of unmet need out there. And so this is like a one-off. It's not addressing the state needs, it's only addressing our needs, and now we're trying to face, and I don't know what the motive is. I mean, what are we trying to fix? Is there a clear message of what we're trying to fix? Emily?
I mean, it's awkward. Now I'm defending someone else's idea, but I'm happy to answer that. So I think the thinking is replacing what we've lost with the bond, with regular revenue coming in to produce sticks and bricks, because as Vahid pointed out earlier, you have to have somewhere to move people to, right, along the continuum until they ultimately have a place to be. So they want to replace the lost funding from the bond. Metro does not find that seems like the right time to go out to ask for a renewal of that bond. And so looking at opportunities to create the full continuum within the existing revenue source. So finding a way to leverage all the dollars, because it is collecting more than we anticipated originally. Finding a way to leverage all of those dollars to go from the very beginning, from the low barrier shelter, all the way to sticks and bricks, which is not an allowed use right now. We're not allowed to use program funding for capital. And so that is the problem that they're trying to solve, and right-sizing the program and the needs of the region. I will say also there's been lots of conversation to the governance issue about developing key performance metrics so everyone understands what we are striving for. The ballot measure said we were striving to end chronic homelessness, but that means different things to different people. Now, to people like Vahid, he knows exactly what that means. But to everyday, community member, it might be a little less clear. We want to tell people what they can get for the investment that the community has given.
Yeah, and if I, again, to Commissioner West's point of focusing on the governor, I'm not criticizing the state or the governor or anyone else here, so my comments are not about people. But the better we do up here, the more funding we provide here with this measure and with the bond, with the other metro bond monies, the state, the governors will naturally say, well, Portland area's got all this, so we'll give more over here. So essentially what happens when you look at the big, huge money in the movement, we're subsidizing somewhat the state, because if we didn't have the supported housing services or the bond.
Oh, yeah, we are.
We'd be realizing more state monies, right? Yep. So this is not, again, we putting the Oz thing back into play here from a state perspective. This is broken, and also for us to now say we have to defund what we're doing and unwind what we're doing is also just lacks logic. And
Thank you. I can make a couple of comments on what you said, Paul, if you don't mind.
I'll yield.
This is driven by the poor performance in Multnomah County, and I've been told that many times, not only from Lynn Peterson, but the Portland Metro Chamber. It says, you're doing fine. I says that, well, we may not be doing fine. I don't know. Secondly, in my conversation with the governor, was that a year and a half ago, when she had her big homeless housing proposal come through, she said, we're not going to give Clackamas County several $1 million. Emily, I don't remember what that figure was, because you have SHS, and we're giving it to the other counties who don't have what you have. To Paul's point, exactly. In a way, we're subsidizing. There is a thought in really some Democrat leadership circles that overall, too many taxes are being collected with too many tax increases. And my answer to that is, stop it in the legislature and don't come to us to fix your huge appetite to increase taxes. Another motivator, another mover in this is the Child Care for All tax in Portland. Businesses are outraged at that. And right now, Jessica Vega Peterson, Chair of Multnomah County, is going back and redoing that based on the pressure she gets from that. So, you consider the CAT tax on businesses. You consider this tax because they're high-income earners who own these corporations are being taxed. And the Child Care for All tax and the arts tax and this tax and this tax. And then you add the legislature's appetite for increased taxes. And then who do they go after? They go after the one leader in the Tri-County area, the chair of Metro, who thinks that she can wave the magic wand, and in a way she can, providing she gets the votes from Metro Council to solve the problem of overtaxation burden. Yeah, it stinks, commissioners. Yeah, it stinks, and that's been the conversations at the table. We'll see what they have. There's been private meetings with Here Together, the nonprofit aside, and then Here Together and Portland Metro Chamber together. Do we know the results of any of that yet? No, and I understand from a brief communication, those are going really well. I don't know what really well means in that. Yes, but Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
Well, rarely am I negative and upset. This is a huge mistake on Metro's part to change this midstream. I'm so sorry they have to make work for themselves because they're bored. And that's something that has worked. And I got into trouble because I didn't oppose the measure. I didn't support the measure because I knew it wasn't going to pass in this county. I knew it wasn't going to pass because I know it's a purple county. Mm-hmm. All right. But it did pass in the other two counties. And by God, we've done the best job, in my opinion, of any other county out there with how we've managed it. And Paul, you and I went through hell. They kept saying, spend the money. Oh, here, give us, take $3 million. How much did they want us to borrow? And I was like, we can't do that right. In this county? Are you serious? With the people that are here? And we said, no, we will not do that. And you were newly elected chair, and we spent months going through, and you were the guru of the whole fiscal policy with these folks, going through what do we have, what can we do when, and we timed it in a way that it worked. And it's also because I said this to the press the other day. I mentioned you guys. I said, do you understand the staff that we have in this county that works on homelessness? Do you understand what we've done here? It's not because of us. I'm sorry, colleagues. It's because of you. It's because of Emily. It's because of Fahid. It's what you've managed to do. And Paul and I really worked hard, I think, at the time to just really make sure that we were doing it the right way. And I got so much grief. I'm the only Democrat left on this board. I got so much grief for that because I know Clackamas County. And I think this is a huge mistake on Lynn Peterson's part, and I hope she hears this. And if she doesn't, maybe I'll just call her and let her have what for. Because there's no reason right now to stop what's a success in this county with what we do for the people that are the most vulnerable. There's just no reason. And I've talked to Christine Lewis about this, who by the way, I have a great deal of respect for Christine Lewis. And Emily, your explanation of why they're doing this is, well, okay, we got more money than we thought, so, we need to put some towards sticks and bricks. And I'm like, why change in midstream? This is the most bogus. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I pay that tax, okay? I'm a single woman, all right, on my own. I'm all I've got. And I am more than happy to pay the money for this initiative, okay? And so, I don't know. I'm just so upset by this. I can't even begin to be rational right now. Sorry. But we need the money for the services. We can figure out the sticks and bricks. What the heck? That's what we have HUD for. That's what I go to NACO for, to lobby to make sure that we get the sticks and bricks dollars at the national level, not just for this county, but for every county across the nation. We don't need Metro to be meddling with this. They just need to stop. And I hope this gets out in the paper. I hope Lynn Peterson has a cow, because I just think it's the most ridiculous, absolutely stupid thing to do at this point in time. I've said enough. I'm sorry. Okay.
I wouldn't be sorry.
Well,
Thank you. Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, good morning. We need to be reminded that in 2020, when the people inside the metro taxation boundary looked at the supportive housing services measure and voted to approve it, less the people in Clackamas County who did not, there was an expectation that this was a very generous decision from the voters, and that the 10-year period that the supportive housing services measure was to last, 10 years, would give us the opportunity to solve homelessness. Now, in 2020, that might have been a bit of a naive expectation that we would solve it in 10 years. But currently, on that 10 years, we're 3 years and 9 months into it. We've made some progress. We still have 6 years and 3 months to go before it sunsets. That's a lot of time. And like Commissioner Schrader said, the idea to stay with what the voters approved in 2020 makes sense to me. Of course, everybody likes to have their taxes reduced, but the measure did provide for a level of funding that has, in fact, caused almost a flood of money. But again, we need to take that money and we need to make sure we make progress to achieve what the voters expected us to do back in 2020, and that's an expectation to solve this homelessness problem. One thing we need to be very careful of is that currently the measure does have a sunset, 31 December, midnight, 2030. We have no right, I think, as elected officials in the metro area to assume that the voters would extend it. We have to make hay when the sun shines with what we have to work with. So again, we have to be very careful about extending ourselves through these ambitious programs that we have. All of these ideas we have to solve homelessness, very outstanding, well-meaning, but we need to make sure we don't put ourselves in a situation where we have overbuilt and then the sunset time comes and we find ourselves unable to sustain what we've come up with. So anyway, that's my thoughts. I personally don't want to entertain any thought, idea, expectation that we're going to ask the voters to extend this past the current sunset. As we get closer, as these next 6 years and 3 months wind down, we might get to a point where we can reassess and look at the idea of going back to the voters again. But until we can show real progress with the money they have given us and the time they've given us to do it in, I don't want to look at even thinking about asking them for more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl. Before I go to Commissioner Savas, when I was presented with a scenario, you know me, I don't think we should raise taxes willy-nilly, and if voters approve to raise the taxes on themselves, it's up to them. And that's not something that this body has ever engaged in as long as I've been chair. And you could say, it's in my DNA to reduce taxes. Oh, absolutely. And there is the thought that there is being so much money collected on this tax and it's sitting in wherever and not being spent is one of the reasons. And so for me too, it is, I'm torn. Additionally, if we consider an extension beyond the 10 years, let's say to 30 years, and a 30 to 20-year extension allows governments to bond for a 20 to 30-year term is why they're thinking about that, because currently you can't bond for 10 years on the extension or on the current measure. Also, if you think about it, let's say, just for fun, let's say they put to the vote and it's a 30-year extension. You know, over time, you could say that's actually a tax increase because you're collecting and you're collecting and you're collecting over time, regardless of if they lowered the rate or raised the indexing. So I'd be really interested in some advanced math on that. You can do it on your Excel spreadsheet. I cannot, I'm not an accountant, but there could be that scenario explained that and I told Lynn Peterson that, oh, don't be so sure that this is going to be painted as a tax reduction if you extend it over time. And she says, don't worry, Tootie. When I write the ballot title, it's going to look like a tax reduction. And let's face it, people only read the ballot titles. They're not going to take a deep dive into this, and that's what our situation is. Thank you. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief here. It's unfortunate that the folks that are driving this conversation are not driving the solutions, right? And you could flip that and say those who are driving the solutions are not at the table and ought to maybe be driving the conversation. Hence the letter that we asked to be part of. So very interesting that 3 Multnomah county commissioners are in San Francisco looking at how San Francisco is doing their modeling to try to bring back some solutions for themselves. And I harken back to the Metro auditor back when this measure passed, and his assessment was that the financial need of Multnomah County was even greater proportionally with the formula mix than that they were going to receive funds. So meaning that essentially I think we were concerned that maybe monies would go from Clackamas to kind of offset that. And yet, if I was a Multnomah County Commissioner today, looking at the math and looking at this scenario, I'd be nervous as hell, far more upset than we are here, right? I think we're on more solid ground than they are. But from a financial standpoint, this is going to affect them more than ever. So I really wonder if they've really thought this through. The state hasn't stepped up in a big way on the mental health issue. We're doing some, right? We haven't met our mark. We're not in our ideal situation with the resources we have for mental health. We're standing up the stabilization center. That's going to be underway. You know, we need stable funding for that. Recovery center, we need stable funding for that. So we're still building all this stuff, right? What do? I don't want to say we tap on the brakes, but, you know, we need certainty, not uncertainty. They're presenting us more uncertainty. If they want to go back and get more housing, I'm sure that's part of our bottleneck. Look at the bond, you know, look at the property tax, look at the mechanisms we're doing this. Again, I don't know what Oz is doped up on, but.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. I'm not in
It's frustrating as hell.
I'm not in disagreement with anything that was said today, but in conclusion, I am going to state this, and I'm going to be very serious about it. We will not consider any new proposals or any funding based on SHS or any other funding service for social services. Because if we don't have that money, we're going to have to backfill with something from the federal and state government. I'm concerned about funding, for instance, the programs that Paul said. We have the Stabilization Center, we have the Rehabilitation Center, and then we have the Navigation Center in downtown Oregon City, okay? Whereas we get emotional, we see a need, and we're going to fund it, Commissioners, the answer is no until we get certainty on this. And maybe if you want to talk to whomever commissioners you want to, but I will not entertain any new proposals here until we know what's going on with that. And I think that is reasonable and responsible. So thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you. Chair, may I add just one more thing?
Yes.
Excuse me. So just an example, just a scenario for you. I appreciate your passion and attention to this. It was not meant to create fear or anything like that. It was just meant to inform you, just to keep you apprised of the conversations and to show that when the time comes, H3S is going to make good, reasonable suggestions, work with administration, work with H3S leadership to craft something that we're still going to be able to deliver on the promises of the measure. They're doing excellent work. Thousands of people are receiving services. They just finished their annual report. It's amazing. If you haven't read it, I just have to put a plug in.
Is that going to be presented here, the annual report? Good.
Yeah. And I will also close with Metro is continuing to have these conversations. They actually have a meeting on Thursday to discuss. I think they capture the board's direction by resolution, so they'll be entertaining a resolution on next steps and kind of their strategy for where they are going to take the changes for this program. So we'll be listening, monitoring that.
Emily, that Thursday meeting is with whom?
With the Metro Council.
Okay, so it's going to be presented at Metro Council. Will it be a vote? Do you know?
I haven't seen the resolution language. I don't know if it's a vote, but I'll check.
I suspect, Commissioners, that is a vote. They wanted to do it on September 26th, and it was delayed till into October.
Yeah.
So we could have something that soon. So, and then we'll give us time. We'll just tap on our brakes with new stuff. It'll give us time to do an analysis on what we want to do. And I think that's reasonable and prudent for now. Thank you. This has been an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Gary, what's next?
Next is a review of your board business meeting agenda for this Thursday, October 3rd, 2024, 10 a.m. You have all the consent agenda items you discussed today and your normal course of business. If you have any questions on any of these items, please let me know prior to Thursday, and staff and I are happy to answer it for you. Next, Chair Smith would like to discuss the Willamette Falls locks.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I forgot to bring in my paper. Regarding the Willamette Falls locks, this commission has generously given $40,000 a year from our lottery dollars under the guise of economic development. The economic development is very slow, very slow. We brought on a new executive director. We keep working with the Corps of Engineers to get to a workable way to open the locks. The Corps of Engineers has completed phase 1 of what they're to do, and it's an assessment of what the repairs might look like, what the legal ramifications for the easements, working with all the different landowners down there at the locks, and that still is not resolved. The $7.5 million that we've got from the federal government, I remember getting that allocation, that's gone on Phase 1, and scant little to show for it. And the thinking from this group is, well, we need to go forward, we're going to ask more money from the legislature, because the legislature only gave half of what was needed for this. The costs have increased from 14 million to 18 million, shocker, without any other revenue besides what we're to get out of the Oregon legislature and out of the federal government. And I don't know if the federal government is in a position to do anything. I just don't know. We know what the budget ramifications in Congress are, and we can always contact our representatives there. But I am very concerned really about the lack of progress. And a Willamette Falls Authority was created by the Oregon legislature with certain guidelines. And it's extremely complicated, jumping through all the hoops. And the appointments, and I was appointed by the governor. Thank you, commissioners, for letting me serve on that. But I'm very concerned about the lack of progress. And I'm also concerned they're going to go back to the local jurisdictions like Metro and Clackamas County and Oregon City and Cortland General Electric and West Linn and here and here and here, and not only want our $40,000 a year, but much more. And I'm concerned that we're not able to give it. I'm also concerned that, well, I'll probably never see in my lifetime those locks opened. I have tried, Martha, I served on this last time, but what I see right now, what's happening, I'm just really concerned about it. I'm not asking for more money. We have a 3-year commitment that's almost done, Gary. And Gary, you did some numbers for me on how much money we have spent since this idea came forward, and how much money has Clackamas County spent?
Approximately $450,000 in staff time and actual dollars over the last 11 years.
Okay. And does that include the employment of Summit Strategies, our
does, yes.
national lobbyists? Okay. So my question to you is, do we want to, not today, do we want to fish, cut bait, and quite possibly look at a different funding source besides us? Seriously. And, I've been the biggest proponent of this forever. I don't see any money coming in from the private sector who want to use this to make money. I don't see current leadership on the authority going out and asking for that, because I said I wanted to do that a year ago. Who can I call to raise money for that? That was squelched. So I don't know what to do with anymore. This is just an update. I don't expect comments from you, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm rather bothered about our lack of progress on this. That's my update. Thank you. Gary, what's next?
Final item today is Commissioner Communications.
Who wants to go first? Joel?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to the Joint Committee on Transportation who came to Clackamas County on Thursday. I had the opportunity to testify that evening.
Oh, good.
I think it was like 8 senators and 8 representatives. It was a cast of thousands, and they all looked tired from moving around the state. And it's interesting, as I sat and listened to all the testimony, every one of those testimonies was, give us the money. Every cities, counties, all sorts of nonprofits, everybody's looking at asking for the money. So big thank you to the members of the Joint Committee on Transportation for coming out and seeing us on Thursday.
Thank you. Commissioner West?
I'm going to save my comments for Thursday. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader?
I will save my comments for Thursday as well.
Commissioner Savas?
I'll just help close the loop on Commissioner Scholl's comments. It's been it's been busy with, as we head towards the legislative session of 2025. They were worn out by the time you got them. We did a tour early on Thursday, and followed by a roundtable discussion, and then on Friday they did it all over again in Hillsborough, Washington County, Hillsborough. So I attended the roundtable in Hillsborough. So I've attended all 3 Metro Region roundtables, and I listened intently, and we played a role. We helped guide the tour on Thursday. You know, some of the legislatures that were there that evening weren't on the tour, but a lot of them were. So it was a mix as the day went on. Same goes for the roundtable. So there were legislators coming in and out. And just reckoning back to, I think the most powerful part was the roundtable discussions. My sense, kind of get a regional sense of what the legislature was saying and what the people around the table were saying. And there's really been a de-emphasis and people even dissing, some of the people dissing the tolling thing and saying, we're not going to go there, don't want to go there, with the exception of one elected official. And I'm saying, when I say this, I'm saying the collective first one tour or roundtable in Portland, the second one ours, and then the third one in Hillsborough. Only one elected official said that tolling should be on the table. But that said, while Commissioner Schull heard people saying, we want the money, the roundtables are about where's it come from, right? And so that's where the roundtable, I think, was valuable. Where's it come from? And I would say that question was not, it ran out of time. So that question was not clear and was not really put to the Clackamas County group. Well, it was very clear, and it was put to the Washington County group and most everyone around that table, bigger than the roundtable we had, actually, it looked like, was VMT, right? And VMT's been premised on a replacement for gas tax. So it wouldn't necessarily be a new tax, it would just be a change. So, but also the conversation, that point that I made is, I don't understand what the need is, because you've got the ODOT staff now saying they need $1.7 billion annually to stay whole, right? That's a lot of money, right? And by the way, that doesn't pay for the projects, right? So the projects is really, I won't say one-time money, but the projects is its own separate bucket, and then you've got the maintenance. So ODOT around the state has been, as they go around the state, has been really also on the bandwagon of trying to sell and tell their story, and the legislators say, hey, we got this funding crisis, we got graffiti in Portland area, we got all these challenges around the state. And so all that said, you know, so their ask is $1.7 billion. And what the locals are really saying, you know, yeah, we're also, our local DOTs like ours, our DTD, you know, we need money too for our, you know, just to stay whole and so forth. So similar things. But it's been really project oriented for a lot. Washington County on Friday, a lot of their projects, some of our Clackamas County folks are talking about projects. But for us, my comment was, I need to understand the math. I'm on all these transportation committees. I work with all of you. I don't understand the math. I didn't really call out the $1.7 billion that they need, or the 1 point something that they need for the capital projects. I just don't understand what went, you know, where we are. Where's it going? What do we get for whatever dollars? And by the way, what funding ideas do you have to pay for these things, right? That comes out, and that's equitable for everyone, right? So everyone pays their fair share. So what they did agree on, here's the good news, what they did agree, apparently, and I don't know when this idea was hatched, I think it was like 3 weeks ago maybe, as I hear it, is they're going to set up 3 committees that's going to involve local electeds, county commissioners, city councilors, so on, and some public folks as well, to discuss. There's one freight committee. I think there's one about safety. So there's some of these, there's 3 different committees. I don't have them all. Sorry for not having that. I'll try to get that put together here for Thursday. But that's the good news. They're gonna listen to us as they ramp up towards the legislative session. So a lot of work's ahead. But I just thought I'd give you that particular update. And even though in the background there has been discussion about tolling rules, the tolling rules seem to have been focused on the interstate bridge, in which ODOT is not going to run that collection program. The state of Washington is going to run that collection program. So, but the rules have to be applied at our state level. So, lots said. It's pretty confusing. Sorry about that, but I thought I'd just give you a precursor to what's to come.
I do have some questions, Paul, in light of my closing comments. Is JPAC going to consider and present to the legislature different possible funding scenarios? For instance, we talked about copying Washington's program on eliminating the DEQ emissions because our cars have very low emissions. Are we going to maybe do something with EVs and the car that I used to drive? What's it?
Hybrid.
Thank you. I can't think of the name. Thank you. The hybrids. Now, I drive a hybrid. You know, I could easily pay another $10 on my registration to do that. You know, that would be one way. And you've heard all this before. And then somebody told me a $5 or $10 increase on your electric bill, because every person who pays an electric bill uses our roads either directly or indirectly. And let's say you don't own a car, but you are dependent on the delivery truck to the grocery store. You are dependent on getting yourself to the doctors, even though somebody else is doing it. So every single person, whether you own a car or drive or not, is dependent upon our roadways. That's another. And I know you asked for a session on that, but I wanted to know if it's going to be generated from the JPAC group to consider that, to keep tolling off the table, if indeed the $1.7 billion just for maintenance is out there. No, that's just, I'm asking these questions rhetorically. You don't expect an answer today. Commissioner West?
This question's for Commissioner, so I guess either one of my colleagues here. Is that 1.7 billion just to stay whole? That doesn't include any of the infrastructure, like improvements and safety corridors and new roads, new capacity? That is just to stay whole? They're 1.8 billion negative, like, can you explain that?
I'll just build on that, hence my question to the state legislature or the folks there at the roundtable is, I don't understand where this is going. So I don't have the answer. I'd love to have the answer, right? I sit on these committees, right? If anyone should be close to it, I ought to be pretty close to it, but I'm not. So this came as a surprise because it was just, a year ago, not even that, it was a year ago, that they foresaw that there'd be a funding crisis, right? That gas taxes get less effective, inflation, less collection because of electric cars and all this stuff, that, the revenues would be flat. And that would be a couple, 3 years out before they would have to do something. Now it's like today. So suddenly it's a crisis. So I guess it's the messaging that is lost where I'm lost, and I want to have a better explanation of that. Is it pie in the sky? Is it, if I was to put our whole capital improvement project for all of our projects on the table, it'd be billions of dollars. We don't do that. Is that what they're proposing? Or maybe is it going to be over a 10-year period? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'm not clear. That's my question, is I'm not clear on what that 1.7, 1.8 billion is. That's a massive number comparatively to their overall ODOT budget. It is, more and more I hear about this and these massive numbers being thrown on and the level bureaucracy, just a financial forensic audit on this agency just seems super overdue. Not that I'm trying to be a barrier or a fly in the ointment. It's a lot of taxpayer dollars. And it doesn't seem to be a lot of accountability. And these are simple questions that we are posing right now and that you still haven't answered, Commissioner, yours haven't been answered either. It's like the most basic of questions, and the government is not giving us those basic answers, so I'm concerned by that. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl.
Well, yeah, exactly. Months ago, I talked to the Secretary of State about what can you do to audit ODOT, because we need to have more transparency about where the money is. And on Thursday night, before the Joint Committee on Transportation, it's one of the points I made, is before you ask the people of Oregon for another tax or a modification of an existing tax, you've got to be able to show them where the money is through 100% transparency. Otherwise, there's not going to be any buy-in statewide for any new way to fund transportation projects.
Correct.
So don't look behind the curtain. Don't look behind the curtain. And Commissioner Schrader, Dorothy, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore.
Thank you. If you look behind the curtain, you might not see the Great Oz, but little Toto instead. Thank you. I see no further comments before commissioners. We are adjourned.